The moment I lifted the pen to hand over my $3 billion company to my son, my phone vibrated. One message that stopped everything. Every eye in the boardroom was on me. Lawyers, shareholders, legacy, expectation. One signature, and 42 years of my life would no longer belong to me. Then I looked down at the screen, and my world tilted. The text said only, "Check the basement, now." No name, no context, just urgency. I stared at the message long enough for the silence around me to sharpen. The storm outside rattled against the 43rd floor windows, lightning reflecting off the polished conference table. My son, Daniel, sat across from me. 34, handsome, confident, impatient. His fiancée, Olivia, rested a manicured hand over his, offering a small, reassuring squeeze. I caught the flicker of annoyance in Daniel's eyes. "Dad," he said, tone forced polite, "this is just a formality. We've spent months preparing for today." I didn't trust my voice, so I only nodded. Lawyers leaned in, pens poised. Several of the shareholders shifted forward like an audience leaning toward the final line of a play. "Just a moment," I finally murmured. I stood slowly, no sudden moves, no sign that the ground had opened beneath me. The double doors closed behind me with a soft sigh that echoed louder than thunder. I walked down the marble hallway, my heartbeat filling my ears like a drum beneath the HVAC hum. I read the message again. "Check the basement, now." Only a handful of people even knew what the basement level held. Access was restricted to the highest clearance: the vault, prototype storage, archives, and the oldest part of the company's soul. I scanned my key card at the elevator. Green light. The doors slid open, swallowing me into cold metal. As the elevator descended, I felt something primal, the same instinct that warned me in the early years when investors tried to take advantage, when competitors made offers disguised as generosity. I knew betrayal had a scent. Today, it smelled like steel and storm. The doors opened to the dim warehouse-like floor. Fluorescence buzzed overhead, casting shadows through the maze of storage racks. And then, voices. Familiar, quiet, but not quiet enough. I moved toward them, steps light, breath slow. I rounded a shelf stacked with shipping crates and saw them. Daniel and Olivia, backs to me, unaware they weren't alone. Olivia's voice carried a soft, smug edge. "Once the old man signs, we freeze him out. He's too sentimental to fight back." Daniel chuckled, that short, cocky sound he'd had since adolescence. "He'll be dead in 10 years. The board respects numbers, not nostalgia from an ancient man." Ancient. I didn't move. I couldn't. Every muscle locked in place. Olivia shuffled note cards like she was practicing a toast. So, Daniel Harrington, youngest CEO in company history, vision over sentimentality, efficiency over legacy. Daniel grabbed her waist playfully. "And after that, we sell everything. The workers are just tools. Who cares what happens to them?" The words hit harder than any punch I'd taken in my life. Those workers, welders, engineers, machinists, the ones who helped me build this empire. I'd gone to their weddings. I attended funerals. I believed loyalty mattered. I believed I had taught loyalty to my son. But what stood before me wasn't ambition. It was hunger. Cold, greedy hunger. Olivia leaned in, lowering her voice in a whisper that still carried. "Your father thinks love makes him strong, but love makes him weak. He'll hand us the knife himself." Daniel smirked. "Can't wait to twist it." My vision pulsed. For a moment, everything swam. The concrete floor, the boxes, the overhead lights all dissolving under the weight of disbelief. I wanted to step forward, confront them, demand answers.
But I didn't. Power doesn't shout. Power observes. Silently, I backed away. One step, then another. My hand brushed the cold steel of a storage rack to steady myself. I had lived through recessions, lawsuits, trade wars, but nothing prepared me for hearing my legacy celebrated as a corpse before I'd even signed it away. I reached the elevator, breathing slow, controlled. If I let even a crack show, I would shatter. The doors closed, and I stared at my reflection in the metal. An older man, yes, but not a defeated one. The elevator rose. With every floor, my pulse steadied. Back on the executive level, the noise of conversation leaked faintly from the boardroom. The chair at the head of the table waited, my chair. The pen still lay where I had set it down. Everyone inside believed they knew how today would end. But the moment I walked back through those doors, they were no longer the only ones holding a plan.
Morning light always hit the kitchen the same way, pale, honest, without mercy. Even the storm from the night before couldn't soften it. As I waited for the coffee maker to finish its slow gurgle, I stood in front of the framed wedding picture on the wall. Laura and I on our old porch swing, her head on my shoulder, her laugh caught mid-burst, eyes full of life. I touched the edge of the frame the way I always did, like greeting her. "I'm trying," I whispered, barely audible. "I really am." I'd spent my entire life trying. People saw Harrington Innovations as a polished empire, $3 billion in valuation, global patents, acquisitions, headlines. But it began in sweat, frustration, and debt. I grew up in a cramped house on the South Side. My father was a factory technician who always smelled faintly of welding gas and engine oil. And my mother was a librarian who believed books could save a soul from poverty. I inherited from them the same contradiction I live by today: grit and grace. My first invention wasn't glamorous. It was a malfunctioning computer motherboard I salvaged from a recycling bin outside the university. I soldered parts onto an old wooden desk in my parents' garage. I burned my hand twice. I slept 3 hours a night, but I built something that worked. Not pretty, not polished, but functional. When Laura first saw the project, before it became the prototype that launched our first contract, she didn't laugh or question or stare with confusion. She simply said, "If it matters to you, it matters to me." That sentence built more than the company ever did. The early years were brutal. We remortgaged the house twice. I had panic attacks in the shower so the kids wouldn't see. There were days the power company shut us off. The threat of bankruptcy was as familiar as dinner. I remember telling Laura once at 3 a.m. in our garage, "I can't do this." She didn't give me a pep talk. She just sat beside me on the floor, held my hand, and said, "You don't need to be fearless. Just don't give up." We built the business brick by brick from that moment. When she got sick 10 years ago, the world didn't slow down for us. Not for the chemotherapy, not for the hospital nights, not for the countdown no one wanted to admit was happening. I watched her fade, and she watched me pretend I wasn't crushed. The night before she passed, she whispered, breath fractured from pain, "Promise me something. Don't let money change who you are. Protect the people who built this company with their hands." I nodded, terrified because I already knew the world was changing faster than either of us. After she was gone, raising Daniel and Sarah became my mission and my apology to life for taking their mother too soon. I loved them the only way I knew, by giving, offering everything I never had: private schools, travel, tutors, summer programs. I wanted to give Daniel a future. I didn't realize I was also giving him expectations. Daniel learned that the world opened for him.
Scholarships weren't needed because checks solved problems. Jobs weren't earned, offered. He was my son, my heir, and maybe I taught him that inheritance replaced responsibility. Sarah was the opposite, kind, quiet, uninterested in corporate success. She studied literature, moved into a tiny cottage near Lake Forest, and published short stories that hardly paid her rent. "I don't need the company to feel close to Mom," she once told me. "I just need you to be okay." She never asked for control. She barely asked for anything. My right-hand partner in the company has always been David Chen, COO, disciplined, sharp-minded, a man who built himself from nothing. He never called me sir, always Tom. That was his way of reminding me we stood shoulder to shoulder. If I ever had a brother, he would have looked like David. "Shareholders trust numbers," he told me recently, tightening a bolt on one of the prototype machines. "But workers trust you, and trust is harder to rebuild." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both knew what he meant. Daniel wasn't me. Then there was Richard Barnes, company attorney for 35 years, friend since my wedding day. He'd been dropping questions lately, disguised as legal caution. "Thomas," he said over a scotch 3 months ago, "has Daniel shown you a strategy that values people or only one that values margins?" I laughed it off. I wanted the transition to succeed. I wanted to age gracefully, to hand the torch with dignity, to believe Daniel was ready. Because if he wasn't, then I'd have to face something far harder, that I might grow old alone. Maybe the succession wasn't just about legacy. Maybe it was about a father craving connection. Later that morning, after the basement revelation, I walked the workshop floor, something I always did before big decisions. The smell of machine oil, metal dust, sweat, it grounded me. I shook hands with welders, line operators, assembly techs. I knew most of their names, their children, their injuries, their setbacks, their triumphs. "Still with us, boss?" Jerry called out from the welding bay, pulling up his mask. "I'm always," I replied. They laughed, and for a moment I felt like I belonged somewhere again. Olivia never came down here. I'd asked her once a few months ago when she and Daniel were touring the expansion facility. "Want to meet the machining crew?" She waved it off without hesitation. "They're irrelevant optics, Thomas. It's not 1985 anymore." I remember stopping mid-step. Irrelevant. The workers Laura fought to honor, reduced to optics. Daniel didn't correct her. That stayed with me. I returned to the kitchen memory. Wedding photo. Coffee cooling untouched. I'd spent 10 years talking to that picture when life got heavy. Laura had been my clarity, my compass. But compasses don't matter if you choose not to follow them. The truth finally formed, not sudden, but slow like fog lifting. The succession wasn't just strategy. It was a longing. I wanted to believe Daniel and I could reconnect by sharing power. That maybe he'd fill the empty chair at holidays, call more, visit more, speak to me with something other than impatience. Maybe I confused closeness with control. Maybe handing him the company felt like handing him love. And in doing so, I blinded myself to the red flags, the entitlement Richard gently warned me about, the cold strategies David didn't respect, the dismissive comments Olivia never hid. Back then, I told myself they were growing pains. Youth, confidence, ambition. Now I knew better. Now I had heard the truth in the basement, the truth spoken when no one thought the king was listening. The succession plan wasn't going to unite my family. It was going to destroy everything Laura and I ever built. And for the first time in years, I felt something I had buried. Fear. Not of losing money, power, or the company. Fear of losing my family for good.
Daniel didn't change overnight. It was gradual. The way rust eats metal slowly until one morning the beam you trusted collapses under its own weight.
He stopped walking the factory floor, stopped greeting people by name, stopped showing up early, and started arriving with an entourage. Designer suits, polished shoes that had never touched sawdust or oil. The IPO analysts became his new priests, market forecasts, scripture. Meanwhile, Olivia hovered beside him like a shadow with perfect posture, cold, calculating, endlessly whispering in his ear. Earnings, efficiency, expansion. She fed him ambition like candy, and he devoured it. The first blow landed at the Tuesday operations meeting. Automation must replace legacy labor, Daniel declared, pacing in front of a digital chart. Pensions? That's an outdated liability. Cutting them increases valuation by 23%. I tried to keep calm. We made a promise. Laura believed in... Olivia cut in before I finished, all silk and poison. Promises are cute. Markets prefer results. A few executives shifted uncomfortably, but no one challenged her. Daniel looked proud, energized, like cruelty made him taller. I gave a measured nod. We'll discuss it further. He grinned like he'd won something. The next week was family dinner, the first since the secession paperwork began moving. We met at a glass-walled restaurant where plates were smaller than credit cards and everyone pretended not to be miserable. Sarah sat next to me, twisting her napkin nervously. She hated places like this. Olivia lifted her wine glass. To the future of Harrington Innovations. Daniel raised his. To inevitable greatness. Sarah hesitated before touching her glass to mine. Then Olivia turned to her, smile razor-sharp. So, Sarah, poetry is still a career path for house pets, yes? The table froze. Sarah blinked. Sorry? Olivia shrugged. It's adorable, really, but it's dead weight in the real world. Right, Daniel? Daniel laughed, a short bark. She's not wrong. I felt my hands tremble beneath the tablecloth. My voice stayed steady only because breaking would have given them power. That's enough, I said. Olivia tilted her head with a theatrical sigh, while Daniel scowled like I'd embarrassed him in front of royalty. Dinner ended with the check landing silently. Expensive food nobody tasted. A few days later, Olivia toured headquarters as if she already owned it. She walked down the main hallway gesturing with big, sweeping motions. This whole community break room, waste of square footage. Replace it with partner suites for investors. She waved toward the frosted glass door of the daycare center, the one Laura fought tooth and nail to create. Laughter from toddlers echoed behind it. And this sentimental nonsense has to go. My jaw locked. You don't touch that. She smiled without warmth. We will. We. Not Daniel and I. We. She believed she was in the ownership equation. The breaking point, or the first near breaking point, came during a board meeting. Daniel projected a slide of cost-cut projections in bold red. Worker loyalty isn't scalable. Efficiency is. People don't think, they follow. Leadership means shaping them into the structure we need. I didn't raise my voice. Maybe that's why it landed harder. They're not tools. They're families. You don't build loyalty by fear. He slammed a hand on the table. You're blinded by nostalgia. No, I replied. I'm guided by responsibility. He stormed out, chair screeching against the polished wood. Olivia paused just long enough to give me a slow, smug smile. Victory without effort, then followed after him. It was theater. They staged the argument for the board, so the board would see him as strong and me as obsolete. That night was the charity gala, Laura's gala, honoring the foundation she created to support employee families in crisis. A night that used to feel sacred. Olivia stood near the open bar in a glittering gown, smiling for cameras.
Reporters asked about the foundation motto, Laura's motto, the quote engraved on the memorial fountain downstairs. Success means nothing if the people who built it can't live with dignity. Olivia's laugh rang through the hall. Lovely sentiment, but let's be honest, humanitarian idealism is unprofitable. Sarah went pale. She squeezed her clutch so hard her knuckles whitened. She looked at me, voice shaking. "Dad, are you sure this is who we're giving the company to?" That question sat like a stone in my chest for days. After the gala, I began watching closer, without reacting. That's how predators win, when emotion makes you reckless. I stayed polite, I stayed civil, and quietly, I collected truths. A forwarded memo where Daniel suggested burying safety complaints to avoid legal delays. A recorded Zoom call where Olivia mocked workers as leavers. A leaked email discussing an aggressive stock buy strategy that skirted legal edges. But I said nothing publicly. Not yet. There was one day, the worst day, that ended the illusion permanently. Daniel had just come out of a market call where projected valuation dipped. He was furious, sweating, barely contained. Employees in the hallway froze as he stormed through. "Maybe if you idiots knew how to follow basic instructions, we wouldn't be bleeding money," he shouted at the nearest group of analysts. One woman apologized, even though she'd done nothing wrong. Daniel didn't slow down. "If performance doesn't improve this quarter, I'll replace half of you. No severance. Fear might finally teach you something." The hallway fell silent, paralyzed. Olivia stepped beside him, smiling with approval so subtle it was chilling. She whispered, not soft enough, "Good, break them now, so they fear you." Fear. I watched the scene from the mezzanine above, unseen but seeing everything. Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. If power had turned Daniel into someone capable of cruelty, then giving him more power wouldn't save him. It would destroy him, and destroy the company Laura and I built with sleepless years, love, and sacrifice. I could no longer pretend succession was the right path. But I couldn't confront him yet. Emotion would fail, rage would fail, public challenge would fracture the company. To protect everything, including Daniel from himself, I needed proof, I needed strategy, and I needed silence. Because justice isn't loud. Justice waits.
The truth doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it returns quietly, like a reminder you hoped would never come back. 3 weeks after the basement incident, I was working late in my office. Most of the building had gone dark. Only a few security lights glowed through the glass walls. I sat revising compensation reports for the factory expansion team, work I found grounding, when my phone vibrated again. A message from the same unsaved number. "Check this. Don't ignore it." A link followed. My chest tightened, not with fear, but recognition. I waited a full minute before clicking it, because I already knew whatever I was about to see would change everything again. The link led to a secure cloud folder, anonymous upload. Inside, security archives, private meeting, sub-level conference room, 0217 a.m. I pressed play. The footage was grainy, black and white, time-stamped, authentic. The camera angle faced the center of a polished table. Daniel sat at the head of it. Olivia sat beside him, posture regal, predatory. Across from them, 3 men in tailored suits carrying leather binders. I raised the volume. Olivia's voice pierced the stillness of my office. "Once we take over, We strip remaining assets, sell IP to foreign buyers, dissolve pensions, and walk away. We'll be billionaires." The investors nodded, flipping through documents. Daniel leaned back, smiling like a man who had already won. "The board won't fight sentimentality. They'll respect numbers. The old man doesn't stand a chance." One of the investors slid a draft across the table. "We'll need a signature to proceed with offshore positioning, just a preliminary commitment." I watched, unable to move, as Daniel took the pen. He signed without hesitation. Timestamp. 2 nights ago. While I slept, thinking maybe things could still be repaired. My hands shook for a moment, then steadied. I paused the video and leaned back in my chair, exhaling once, long, controlled. Then the link refreshed itself. A second file appeared. Confidential. To Attorney Linda Cooper. Subject: Guardianship and Incapacity Filing Timeline. I opened it. The document outlined a legal strategy to declare me mentally unfit within 6 months. Medical evaluations prearranged, witness affidavits drafted, financial oversight to be transferred entirely to Daniel upon ruling. There was even a draft resignation statement, written as if by me, expressing deteriorating cognitive function and desire to spend twilight years in peace. They planned to erase me. Not just remove me from leadership, remove me from myself. For a moment, I didn't breathe. I just stared at the words, my reflection faint on the screen. Then I printed it. Every page, slowly, deliberately. Before I shut down my screen, one more file appeared in the folder. A compressed email archive. No subject. I opened it. Dozens of threads. One titled, Narrative Strategy Post-Succession. Inside, they mocked workers as overgrown children. Another thread, Sarah PR risk. Olivia joked about the poetic parasite. And then one stabbed deeper than all the others. Laura, the dead woman who left 2 big shoes. Daniel replied in that thread. Her era is over. Sentimental leadership ends with me. I sat very still, for a long time. That was the moment I understood, with freezing clarity, that they weren't after my legacy. They were after erasing everything I stood for, including Laura. And something inside me hardened. Not rage, not grief, not shock. Steel. I gathered every document, printed copies, hard backups, timestamps, metadata. I locked them in my desk, then printed duplicates and sealed them in a plain envelope. I called one person, the only person I trusted with this, Richard Barnes. He answered on the second ring. Tom, it's late. I need to meet, privately, no digital trail. His tone shifted immediately. Where? We met after hours in his office. Blinds closed, night skyline glowing behind him. I laid the documents out across the table. He read in silence, his jaw clenching harder with each page. When he finished, he leaned back and took off his glasses. This isn't ambition, he said. This is a coordinated takeover. I know. He tapped the footage, still frame, Daniel signing. This is proof of malicious corporate dismantling. And this, he lifted the guardianship plan, is premeditated elder fraud. If you expose this in a live board meeting, it forces an immediate reversal of succession, legally airtight. I nodded once. But Tom, he continued gently, this is your son. I swallowed. My voice felt ancient when it came out. He stopped being my son when he decided to destroy everything his mother built. Richard exhaled slowly. When you're ready, I'll stand by you. I placed a hand on the envelope. Not yet. I need to do this right. No civilian casualties. He didn't need clarification. He knew I meant workers, shareholders, employees, the tens of thousands of lives depending on the company's stability. "Then prepare quietly," Richard said, "and don't let them see you change." That line became my armor. In the weeks that followed, I moved like a ghost, calm, predictable, unthreatening. I shook hands on the factory floor. I answered emails with patience. I complimented Daniel in meetings. I even thanked Olivia for her strategic insights. Because enemies who think they've already won make mistakes. Meanwhile, I prepared, in absolute silence. I scheduled a quarterly board meeting under routine compliance pretense. I personally updated the agenda. I gathered key executives privately, not to warn them, but to build a foundation of trust. I reviewed every contract Daniel had signed, every investor conversation, every memo Olivia authored. I archived everything. I left one copy of the evidence envelope in my office safe. I left another hidden somewhere no one would think to look. And every night, before heading home, I walked past Laura's memorial fountain in the lobby, the quote etched in stone: "Success means nothing if the people who built it can't live with dignity." I would stop there and speak to her quietly in my mind. "You spent your life protecting others. Now, it's my turn to protect you, your legacy, your memory, our people." The storm was coming. Not metaphorically, but literally. The next board meeting was scheduled on a day heavy with rain in the forecast. A fitting stage. I didn't know yet who sent the anonymous messages. I didn't know whose side they were on. But Betrayal had declared war. Now, dignity would answer.
The ballroom glittered with gold lighting and polished expectation. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto 400 employees, investors, reporters, and board members. Tuxedos, gowns, champagne glasses, rehearsed smiles. It was the annual Founders' Gala, the most sacred night of the company, and the one chosen to announce Daniel as CEO. The orchestra faded into a gentle final note as the host spoke into the mic. "Tonight, we celebrate the future of Harrington Innovations and the leadership transition that will define a new era." Olivia's smile gleamed like a trophy. Daniel adjusted his tie, shoulders squared, confidence radiating. He looked at me from across the room and gave a small nod of victory, believing the throne was already his. I sat steady, calm, no trace of storm in my posture, only the quiet resolve forged in the weeks before. When the host said, "Please welcome founder Thomas Harrington," a wave of applause rose. I stepped onto the stage, not hurried, not hesitant, simply present. The room softened into silence, the kind that assumes celebration is coming. I began slowly, dignity first, always dignity. 42 years ago, this company began in a garage, not with ambition, but with necessity. We didn't dream of becoming a global powerhouse. We dreamed of keeping the lights on. Light laughter rippled gently through the audience. Daniel smirked, certain he knew the speech's direction. I've been asked many times for the secret to success. It was never product design, quarterly numbers, or shareholder returns. It was the people who built this company with their hands. A murmur of agreement from the workforce tables. I turned slightly toward the memorial portrait displayed to one side of the stage, Laura's photo, taken 5 months before she passed. "My late wife believed leadership means protecting those who make your success possible." My voice stayed soft, steady. But somewhere along the way, some of us forgot what leadership means. The room tightened. A few executives leaned forward.
Daniel's posture stiffened, confusion sparking in his eyes. We forgot loyalty, humanity, responsibility, the belief that success means nothing if the people who built it can't live with dignity. Olivia looked around, as if searching for a cue or an exit. I gestured lightly with my hand. Daniel, Olivia, join me on stage. The audience clapped politely as they walked up, Daniel adjusting his jacket with performative humility, Olivia extending her perfect smile. They took their positions beside me, center stage. Then I pressed a remote hidden in my hand. The massive screens behind us, which had been showing a highlight reel of product launches, cut abruptly to black. Gasps. Heads swiveled. Then the footage played. Grainy time-stamped video. Daniel sitting in a sub-level conference room. Olivia beside him, voice dripping confidence. Once we take over, we strip remaining assets, sell IP to foreign buyers, dissolve pensions, and walk away. We'll be billionaires. The ballroom erupted, chairs scraping, gasps, alarmed voices. Someone dropped a champagne flute. It shattered sharply across the tile. Daniel went pale. Olivia grabbed his arm. Shut it off! Turn it off! I continued speaking into the mic, calm, measured, overriding the chaos. 2 nights ago, my son signed a preliminary contract to dismantle Harrington Innovations and sell its pieces to the highest foreign buyers. The screen cut to the contract, Daniel's signature prominent. He stepped toward me, panic rising. Dad, you misunderstood. It's strategic leverage. I didn't look at him. I pressed the remote again. Email threads filled the screen. Workers referred to as overgrown children. Plan to declare me mentally unfit in 6 months. Comments mocking Sarah as a parasite. And then the one that killed the last of my hesitation. Laura, the dead woman who left 2 big shoes. A sound came from the front row, a wounded gasp. Sarah. Daniel's voice cracked. Dad, please, you have to listen, please! Olivia lunged for the mic. You senile! I turned to her, speaking into the mic. Gentle. I am many things, but blind isn't one of them. The audience roared, not with anger, but with shock and painful recognition. Security moved in. 2 board lawyers approached the stage, not toward me, but toward Daniel and Olivia. They placed documents in their hands. Effective immediately, one lawyer announced into her headset mic. Daniel Harrington and Olivia Carter are removed from all corporate authority and barred from company property pending investigation. Olivia sputtered, voice strained and shrill. You can't do this! You can't! This company belongs to... It belongs, I replied sharply, to the people who built it. Applause broke, hesitant at first, then swelling. Workers clapped with relief. Executives clapped with dawning loyalty. Investors clapped because they saw integrity and stability, not collapse. Daniel's voice shattered under the noise. Dad, please, don't ruin my life. I met his eyes for the first time that night. You almost ruined thousands. He reached for me, desperate, but security held him back as Olivia yanked his arm, telling him to walk off. He didn't walk, he stumbled. As they were escorted away, the room rose to its feet. Applause thundered under the chandeliers, not for revenge, but for protection, for Laura, for the legacy, for the thousands of families who depended on truth winning. I stood still, absorbing none of it. Applause was never the point.
When the noise finally softened, I brought the microphone to my lips for the final line. This company was built with hands. Tonight proves it will never be destroyed by greed. The orchestra picked up, not triumphant, but strong, protective. I stepped off the stage with no smile, no celebration, just calm. Sarah rushed into my arms backstage, trembling. "Dad, you did the right thing." I kissed the top of her head. I did the necessary thing. We stood together for a moment, but eventually I let go, because justice wasn't finished, only weakened. The applause remained thunderous behind me as I walked toward the exit, but my expression stayed still, reflective, almost somber. I hadn't won anything tonight. I had simply stopped something terrible, and protecting a legacy will never feel like victory. It will always feel like love and loss.
Fallout came fast. Within 24 hours of the gala, every major investor pulled out of Daniel's offshore deal. Media outlets replayed the footage on a loop. The signatures, the emails, the comment about the dead woman who left 2 big shoes. Olivia tried to run PR damage control first. In a televised interview she forced through her publicist, she smiled stiffly and said, "It was taken out of context. Thomas is confused. He's elderly." No one bought it. A reporter cut her off mid-sentence. "Ma'am, the footage shows you signing away pensions and mocking the founder's late wife." Olivia's eyes widened. She wasn't used to being challenged. 2 hours later, investors pulled funding from her consulting firm. Sponsors cut ties. Someone compiled every clip of her calling workers irrelevant optics into a viral montage. She disappeared from public view. Daniel tried a softer approach, teary-eyed accountability on camera, shaking voice, trembling hands. "I was misguided," he told the press. "I thought efficiency was leadership. I forgot about people." But sincerity isn't something you can manufacture, not when the world has already seen who you are when you think no one's watching. Comment sections turned brutal. Former classmates, colleagues, professors, all sharing stories of his arrogance. Companies that once courted him cut their offers. Board invitations vanished. Then came the calls to me. Every morning for a week, a new voicemail. "Dad, please call me back. I swear I never meant to hurt the company. Please, I'm losing everything. Dad, I need you. I'm sorry. Please, just talk to me." I listened to every one of them. Headphones on, lights off, room silent. Each message chipped away at anger, but didn't rebuild trust. When a son apologizes only after losing power, it's not repentance, it's survival. I didn't delete the voicemails. I also didn't respond. Because love isn't always rescue. Sometimes love is consequence. While the world judged Daniel and Olivia, the company took a breath. And life, real life, began to rebuild. Sarah started coming to the office again, but not for corporate power. She joined the foundation division, expanding the family crisis program Laura created. I watched her lead her first initiative briefing. Calm voice, confident posture, workers leaning in, trusting her. After the meeting, she joked, "Look at me, a Harrington in the company after all." I smiled. "You earned your place. That matters." She smiled back, her mother's smile. The next decision I made wasn't dramatic. No stage, no applause. Just a private executive meeting in a sunlit boardroom. I stood at the head of the table,
holding the paperwork to appoint the new CEO. David, you're the one who should have led this company, not because of blood, but because of loyalty and competence and character. He blinked, stunned. Tom, you don't have to do this. I shook my head. I do. He swallowed hard. If I accept, I'll run it with the values you and Laura built. I know. We shook hands, his grip steady, mine steady back. No applause, no cameras. Just the right thing being done quietly. When the announcement went public later that afternoon, the halls shook with cheers. Someone popped a champagne bottle in the cafeteria. Employees lifted their kids into the air in the daycare center downstairs. The Machinists' Union sent a handwritten card that read, "Thank you for remembering us." Payroll reinstated pensions. Automation freezes were lifted. The break room stayed. The daycare stayed. The company, our company, stayed. Later that week, Richard came by with a final folder. "Legally tight," he said, placing it in front of me. "Daniel and Olivia can never regain authority. Not now, not ever." I stared at the stamped pages, the full circle of consequences. "Thank you," I told him. He gave a small nod, the respectful, wordless kind between men who've survived something together. When the office emptied that night, I didn't go home immediately. I sat in the dark conference room, the same room that once held the signing ceremony that never happened. Rain hit the windows, not a violent storm, but steady, rhythmic droplets. The city lights blurred behind the glass, the way memory blurs behind time. I thought I'd feel victorious. I didn't. I thought I'd feel broken. I didn't. What I felt was something quieter. Peace. I picked up the phone, not to call Daniel, but to replay one of his voicemails. Not to reopen a wound, but to understand it. His final message was soft, blurry with tears. "Dad, I know you think I'm apologizing because I lost everything. Maybe that's true. But losing everything made me realize how much I took for granted. I wish I'd learned sooner." I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just listened. One day, maybe, I would call him back. Time has its own laws, and love, when real, doesn't expire. But forgiveness without accountability isn't love. It's surrender. And I didn't survive 42 years of building a legacy to surrender now. I stood and walked to the window, resting my hand lightly against the glass. My reflection stared back, older, tired, but not defeated. Laura once told me that leadership means choosing people even when it hurts. I finally understood. Restoring the company had broken my heart, but it had saved thousands of others. And sacrifice, I realized, is a language only the truly responsible ever learn to speak. The rain softened. The city lights sharpened again. It was time to go home.
8 months passed. Seasons turned without permission, and the company settled into a rhythm that felt like breathing again. Workers smiled more. Meetings sounded human again. The scholarship program in Laura's name awarded its first grants to 3 employees' children, the kind of milestone she would have framed on the refrigerator. Life didn't heal perfectly. It never does. It simply moved. Then, one Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in many weeks. Daniel. Not a voicemail. Not an apology. Just a text. "Dad, if you're open to it, I'd like to talk. Nothing about the company. Just talk." There were no attachments, no demands, no angles. I agreed. We met at a small coffee shop, not the kind we used to take business partners to, but the kind where the floor creaked and people read paperbacks. Daniel arrived alone, dressed simply, hair a little longer, eyes a little older. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he exhaled. "I know I can't fix what I did. I just want to understand how to become someone better." Not a plea, not a pitch, just honesty. I nodded once. That begins with responsibility, not power. He looked down at his hands. "I'm trying." We sat there for an hour, sipping bitter coffee, not a reconciliation, something more fragile, more honest, a beginning, a path still full of wounds, but also possibility. Before we left, he asked me, "Can we meet again sometime?" "Yes," I said, "but remember, love isn't entitlement." He swallowed, nodding. "I understand." It was the first boundary I'd ever set with him, and he didn't fight it. Days later, life continued unfolding in ways that didn't need grand speeches. Sarah won a regional writing award, her story about factory workers balancing pride and pain. She read it aloud at a small bookstore event. I sat in the front row, hands clasped, heart full. When she finished and the audience applauded, she looked up at me, not for approval, but to share the moment. Afterwards, she hugged me and whispered, "Thanks for still believing in us, even when we didn't understand." I squeezed her shoulder. That's what family is. Back at the office, the scholarship in Laura's memory officially launched. The plaque at the entrance read, "For the children of those who build with their hands." Inspired by Laura Harrington. Parents took pictures beside it. The first recipient, a shy 18-year-old, thanked me with watery eyes. But I told her quietly, "Thank my wife. This is her legacy." Some victories are loud, but the ones worth keeping are quiet. One evening, long after everyone had gone home, I found myself back where it all started, the private workshop on the basement level. Dust floated through the warm pool of light from the single hanging lamp. On the workbench sat an old sheet metal press I'd first repaired when I was 22, a relic of the beginning. I rolled up my sleeves and set to work, wrench in hand, sleeves stained with grease by the second hour. The smell of metal and machine oil, the scrape of bolts loosening, the click of gears realigning, it all felt like returning to a language I'd forgotten I spoke. Sarah's award was framed on a shelf. The scholarship plaque hung on the opposite wall. A photo of Laura leaned gently against the toolbox, her smile permanent, unburdened, familiar. As I worked, I wasn't thinking about hostile takeovers or boardrooms or stock valuation. I wasn't thinking about victory or scandal. I was thinking about hands. Hands that build. Hands that repair. Hands that guide when words fail. Eventually, the machine came back to life, humming a little unevenly, but humming. I wiped my hands on a rag and leaned against the bench, letting the quiet settle. In that stillness, the reflection came, not bitter, not triumphant, simply true. I thought the hardest part of getting old was losing strength. I was wrong. It's watching those you love forget the values that built them. But sometimes, if you're patient, they remember again, or learn for the first time. I turned off the lamp, ready to head upstairs. Before leaving, I looked once more at the workshop, the birthplace of everything, the place where sweat was currency and hope had no guarantees. The company was safe. The people were safe. Laura's memory was safe. Daniel wasn't lost, just unfinished. And I was still building. As I closed the workshop door behind me, one final thought settled with absolute certainty. Sometimes the quietest victories are the loudest truths.